She cheated on me last night. Those words feel foreign in my mind, like they belong to someone else's tragedy. But they don't. They belong to me, to my life, my marriage, my wife. Laura. The realization didn't hit me all at once. It came in fragments, like pieces of shattered glass cutting into my skin, each one revealing a sharper truth. It started with a text message, a text that wasn't meant for me. I miss you already. Last night was incredible. Can't wait to see you again. The message flashed across Laura's phone screen as it lay charging on our nightstand. A simple notification, a casual betrayal. At first, my mind refused to process it. I was in bed, half asleep, still lost in the warmth of our anniversary celebration from earlier that evening. I had spent months planning that night, booking the perfect restaurant, surprising her with a bracelet engraved with the words forever, just like we promised. She had kissed me then, her lips soft against mine, her eyes glistening as she whispered, "I love you, Mark." And now, here I was, staring at her phone, at a message that didn't belong in our marriage. My heart pounded as I reached for it. My hands trembled as I swiped the screen, needing to see more, needing to know. But just as I was about to unlock it, Laura stirred beside me. I barely had time to pull my hand away before she turned in her sleep, murmuring something incoherent. I lay still, my breath caught in my throat. I wanted to wake her up right then, to shake her and demand answers. Who is he? How long has this been going on? But I didn't. Not yet. I needed to be sure. I needed to gather the pieces before I let the storm break loose. So instead, I stared at the ceiling, my pulse thundering in my ears as the walls of my life quietly began to crumble around me. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. By the time the first light of morning crept through the curtains, I had already made up my mind. I was going to find out everything. Morning came like a slow, cruel revelation. Laura stirred beside me, stretching with a soft sigh before her eyes fluttered open. She smiled sleepily, pressing a kiss to my shoulder like she had every morning for the past 10 years. But today, it felt different. Forced. Fabricated. I wanted to ask her about the message right then, to watch her expression shift, to catch the flicker of guilt in her eyes before she smothered it with a lie. But I held back. Instead, I did something I never thought I would. I played along. "Morning beautiful," I said, forcing a smile. She grinned, her fingers tracing lazy circles on my arm. "Morning. Last night was amazing." The words twisted like a blade in my gut. Amazing. She wasn't talking about me. I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat and kissed her forehead, playing the role of the devoted husband while a war brewed beneath my skin. As she got up and headed to the shower, I reached for her phone again, my pulse hammering in my ears. It was locked, of course, but I knew her passcode. It was our anniversary date. Or at least it used to be. I tried it. Wrong. I tried her birthday. Wrong again. A cold wave of realization settled over me. She had changed it. She had never changed her passcode in 10 years. Not once. That was the moment I knew, without a doubt, that she was hiding something. I placed the phone back on the nightstand before she could notice, my mind racing. If I was going to find the truth, I had to be smarter than this. Laura emerged from the bathroom a few minutes later, wrapped in a towel, steam curling around her like an illusion of innocence. She caught me watching her and smirked. "Like what you see?" I forced myself to chuckle. "Always." She laughed, turning to the closet to pick out her outfit for the day. "You're in a good mood. Guess last night worked its magic, huh?" Magic? I felt sick. "You could say that," I murmured. She got dressed quickly, checking her phone as she did. I watched her out of the corner of my eye. There it was, the slight tension in her shoulders, the way she exhaled softly like she had been holding her breath, the way her fingers moved just a little too quickly to delete a message before I could see it. My suspicions hardened into certainty. "Are you working late tonight?" I asked casually as she pulled on her heels. She hesitated for half a second. Just half a second. But I caught it. "Yeah," she said, slipping on her bracelet, the one I had given her last night, the one engraved with a promise she had already broken. "A meeting with the team. Might run a little late." "Lucky me. Guess I'll have to entertain myself." She laughed. walking over to kiss me goodbye. "Don't miss me too much," she teased. Then she was gone, and I was left sitting in bed, staring at the empty space where she had just been, wondering how the hell I was supposed to breathe through the weight of betrayal pressing down on my chest. But I had made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her yet. No, I was going to follow her. Tonight, I was going to find out exactly where she was going, and exactly who she was meeting. I spent the day trapped in my own head, replaying every moment from the past few months that I had ignored, dismissed, or excused. The late nights, the unexplained text messages, the sudden shift in how she touched me, like she was fulfilling an obligation instead of wanting me. It had been happening right in front of me, and I had been too blind to see it. Not anymore. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, my plan was set. Laura thought I would spend the evening at home, maybe watching TV, maybe scrolling through my phone, waiting like a devoted husband. She had no idea I would be right behind her. At exactly 7:15 p.m., I heard the familiar sound of her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. I stayed in the bedroom, pretending to be busy with my laptop as she called out, "I'll see you later, babe." "Love you," I said automatically. The words felt hollow now. She didn't say it back. The door clicked shut, and I waited. Long enough for her to get a head start, before grabbing my keys and heading out. I had parked my car down the street earlier, just in case. I slipped into the driver's seat and pulled up my phone's location tracker. Laura wasn't the only one who had changed. I had been careful, subtle. A few nights ago, while she was sleeping, I had synced her phone to mine. Just enough access to track her. Just enough access to see what she was hiding. A small blue dot marked her location, moving across the screen. She wasn't heading to her office. I had known she wouldn't be. My grip tightened on the steering wheel as I followed at a safe distance. She drove across town, weaving through streets that weren't on her usual route. No rush, no nervous glances in her rearview mirror. She was comfortable, confident. She had no idea I was watching. 15 minutes later, she pulled into a dimly lit parking lot beside a boutique hotel. My stomach clenched as I parked a few spaces away, keeping my headlights off. A hotel? Not even a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. A boutique hotel. Classy. Expensive. The kind of place that made you feel special. The kind of place where affairs happened. I watched as she stepped out of the car, smoothing her dress. She looked beautiful. She always did. And for the first time in 10 years, I hated that. My breath came in slow, measured waves as I forced myself to stay calm. If I confronted her now, I'd get anger, denial, maybe even tears. I didn't want that. I wanted the truth. So I waited. And then, he arrived. A sleek black BMW pulled into the lot, parking just a few spaces from hers. My pulse pounded in my ears as I watched the driver's door swing open. And that's when I saw him. Daniel. The air in my lungs turned to ice. It wasn't just some random stranger. It was Daniel, my best friend, the man who had stood beside me at my wedding, grinning as he toasted to a love that would last forever. The man who had held my son when he was born, calling him his honorary nephew. The man who had been a part of my life for over 15 years. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. This wasn't just infidelity. This was betrayal. I watched as Laura walked toward him, her face lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in years. She kissed him. Not a polite peck. Not a brief moment of hesitation. A deep, lingering kiss. I felt like I was going to be sick. Every part of me wanted to storm out of the car, to rip him away from her, to demand answers. But I didn't. I forced myself to stay put, to watch. Because this wasn't just about anger. This was about knowing. They disappeared inside the hotel together, his hand resting on the small of her back like he owned her. I sat there in the silence of my car, staring at the entrance, my mind a whirlwind of rage, disbelief, and something else. Something darker. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, but in reality, it was minutes. Just long enough to watch them disappear inside. Long enough to know for certain that everything I believed about my marriage was a lie. The rage inside me was volcanic, an eruption waiting to happen. My fingers dug into the steering wheel. My jaw clenched so tightly it ached. I wanted to act, to do something, to storm inside that hotel, to grab Daniel by the collar and make him feel the weight of his betrayal. But I didn't. I had come this far by being smart, by being careful. Now wasn't the time for reckless emotions. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to think beyond the storm in my head. I needed proof, not just for me, but for whatever came next. I wasn't going to give Laura or Daniel the chance to spin this into something smaller than it was. So I grabbed my phone. I took pictures of their cars parked side by side in the lot. The timestamp was clear. Then I stepped out of my car, moving quickly but discreetly toward the hotel entrance. The lobby was dimly lit, with a receptionist scrolling mindlessly through her phone behind the desk. She barely glanced up as I walked in. Good. I didn't want attention. I kept my distance, scanning the room until I spotted them. Laura and Daniel, at the far end of the lobby, waiting for the elevator. He was standing behind her, his hand resting low on her back, too low. He leaned in close, whispering something into her ear that made her laugh, her head tilting back in that effortless way I had once believed was reserved for me. I lifted my phone. A quick snap. The image froze on my screen. Laura, smiling, glowing under the warm hotel lights, her body angled into his like she belonged there. I had my proof, but nothing about it felt like a victory. It felt like death, a slow, silent death of the life I had spent 10 years building. The elevator doors slid open. They stepped inside, and Daniel pulled her against him. She didn't resist. She welcomed it. The last thing I saw before the doors closed was her hand curling around the back of his neck. I turned and walked out of the hotel, each step heavier than the last. I didn't drive home right away. I couldn't. Instead, I found myself at the edge of the city, parked in a quiet lot overlooking the river. The night stretched endlessly before me, the city lights flickering against the water like ghosts of something long gone. I replayed every moment in my head. How long had it been going on? Had it started as harmless flirtation? Had it been years in the making? Or had it begun with a single night, a drunken mistake that spiraled into something neither of them had the strength or the desire to stop? And the worst thought of all, was I the fool for never seeing it? I gripped the steering wheel, my breath unsteady. No, I wouldn't do this to myself. I wouldn't let their betrayal become my self-destruction. I checked my phone, scrolling through the photos I had taken. Evidence. The only thing that mattered now. Laura didn't know what was coming. Daniel sure as hell didn't either. But they would. And when I was done, they'd never forget it. I sat in the car for hours, the weight of betrayal pressing against my ribs like a slow, crushing force. The city moved around me, cars passing, people living their lives, oblivious to the war raging inside me. At some point, my phone buzzed. Laura. I stared at her name on the screen, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. For a split second, I considered answering, just to hear her voice, just to see if she'd sound different now that I knew. But I already knew what she'd say. Hey babe, just finished up at the office. Running late. Love you. A lie, effortless and smooth. A deception wrapped in the same voice that used to whisper forever against my skin. I let it ring. A few seconds later, a message came through. Laura, just wrapped up. Heading home soon. Want me to pick up anything? I laughed. A cold, hollow sound in the silence of my car. She had just spent the last few hours in a hotel with my best friend, and now she wanted to know if I needed anything from the store. My stomach twisted with something dark. I had been right to wait. If I had confronted her in the hotel parking lot, I would have only gotten half-truths and rehearsed apologies. But now? Now, I had control. I wasn't just a man who had been cheated on. I was a man preparing his next move. By the time I pulled into our driveway, Laura was already home. The lights were on, the scent of dinner wafting through the air as I stepped inside. Hey, handsome, she called from the kitchen. I wasn't sure if you ate, so I made pasta. I stood in the doorway, watching her. She looked normal. No guilt, no hesitation. Just Laura in one of my old t-shirts, stirring a pot of sauce like she hadn't been tangled in another man's sheets 2 hours ago. I wondered if she had showered at the hotel, if she had scrubbed away the evidence of Daniel before walking through our front door. Or maybe she didn't think she needed to. Smells great, I said, forcing a smile. She turned, beaming. You okay? You look a little tired. Tired. I wanted to laugh. Instead, I walked up behind her, wrapping my arms around her waist like I used to. I felt her tense, just for a second, before she leaned into it. I buried my face in her hair, inhaling vanilla and honey, the scent I had known for a decade. But beneath it, something else. Something faint. Something expensive. His cologne. My stomach burned. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat and kissed her temple. You know what? I murmured. Let's open a bottle of wine tonight. Celebrate us. She laughed softly. You're being sweet. What's the occasion? I smiled against her hair. Oh, just love. She turned in my arms, pressing a kiss to my lips. I love you, she whispered. The lie sat between us, thick and suffocating. I kissed her back, slow and deep. She had no idea what was coming. I poured the wine with steady hands, though my mind was anything but calm. Laura sat across from me at the dinner table, twirling pasta around her fork, her eyes warm and familiar. A wife. My betrayer. She had no idea I knew. No idea that every move she made, every soft smile, every casual touch, was being dissected under the weight of what I had seen. I raised my glass. To us. She clinked hers against mine, her lips curving into a soft smile. To us. We drank. The wine was expensive, one of the bottles I had saved for special occasions. A cruel irony. Long day at work? I asked, my voice even. She sighed dramatically, rolling her shoulders. God, yes. You know how these meetings go. I smiled. Oh, I know exactly how they go. You must be exhausted, I continued, watching her carefully. All those hours at the office. She nodded, sipping her wine. It was never-ending. She didn't even blink when she lied to me. Did she even respect me enough to pretend anymore? I leaned back in my chair, studying her. She was comfortable. Too comfortable. She thought she was untouchable. And maybe that was my fault. Maybe I had spent too many years giving her the benefit of the doubt, loving her unconditionally while she built a life in the shadows with another man. But the game had changed. I had changed. I took another sip of wine, swallowing down the bitterness in my throat. I saw Daniel today, I said casually. It was subtle, but I caught it. The brief flicker of hesitation before she masked it with an easy smile. Oh yeah? How's he doing? You tell me. Same old, I said, swirling my wine. I was actually thinking, we should invite him over for dinner one night. It's been a while. She took a sip, buying herself a second to think. Yeah, sure. That'd be nice. Lies stacked on top of lies. She didn't want Daniel here, not with me. Not with the two lives she was juggling at the same table. I smiled, setting down my glass. You know, Laura, I feel like I've been neglecting you lately. Her brow furrowed slightly. What? No, babe, not at all. No, really, I continued, reaching across the table to take her hand. I've been thinking, I should be putting more effort into us, making sure you feel appreciated. Her fingers curled around mine. Mark, you don't have to do that. I already feel appreciated. I studied her. I knew the kind of man Daniel was. The way he made women feel special. He had done it all our lives, charming his way into people's hearts with expensive gifts, extravagant gestures, making them feel like they were the center of the universe. Was that what she wanted? Was that why she had gone to him? I tightened my grip ever so slightly. Well, I murmured, let me prove it to you. She tilted her head. What do you mean? I smiled. Slow. Calculated. I have something special planned for us this weekend. Oh. She raised a brow, intrigued. Like what? I squeezed her hand one last time before pulling away. It's a surprise. I watched the curiosity spark in her eyes, the excitement. Good. Because this wasn't just a surprise. This was the beginning of her reckoning. The next few days passed like a slow, calculated game of chess. I played my role perfectly, the loving husband, the man desperate to rekindle the fire in his marriage. I kissed Laura more often, held her longer, whispered sweet promises into her ear. I watched as she relaxed under the illusion that she was still in control, that she had me wrapped around her finger. She had no idea that I was watching her just as closely. Every night, I checked my phone, tracking her location. She didn't deviate. The same pattern, the same hotel, the same man. Daniel, my best friend, my wife, the people I had trusted most in this world. But trust had a way of turning into a weapon when placed in the wrong hands. And I was about to take it back. Saturday evening, the night of the surprise. Laura stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the gold necklace I had bought her years ago. The one she suddenly never wore anymore. Until tonight. "You look beautiful," I said, stepping behind her, sliding my hands over her waist. She smiled at my reflection. "I still don't get why you won't tell me where we're going." I kissed her neck, inhaling the scent of vanilla and honey. "Because surprises are meant to be unexpected." She giggled, playfully swatting at my chest before grabbing her clutch. "You're in a good mood." I was. Because tonight, she was going to know exactly what it felt like to be blindsided. The drive was quiet, filled with the low hum of music and Laura's occasional glances at me, like she was trying to read my thoughts. She was excited. She thought this was some grand romantic gesture. She had no idea that I was driving her straight into the ruins of the life she had set on fire. 15 minutes later, I pulled into a familiar parking lot. The boutique hotel. Laura stiffened. I turned off the engine, letting the silence stretch between us. She forced out a small laugh. "Mark, why are we here?" I smiled. "Slow. I figured if you like it so much, we should make a memory here together." Her fingers tightened around her clutch. I don't understand." I leaned closer, my voice dropping to a whisper. "You don't have to pretend, Laura. I know." Her breath hitched. I watched as the blood drained from her face, as the lie she had built so carefully began to collapse under its own weight. The silence between us became suffocating. Then, the final nail in the coffin. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and tapped the screen. Up popped a picture. Her. In this hotel. Kissing Daniel. Laura gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Mark, don't," I said sharply. She swallowed hard, blinking rapidly, her mind scrambling for a way out. "I can explain," she tried, her voice barely above a whisper. I turned to her, my expression calm, cold. "No, Laura," I said. "I will explain." She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "I trusted you," I said, my voice steady. "For 10 years. I built a life with you. I gave you everything, and you threw it away for him." Tears welled in her eyes. "It wasn't like that." I laughed. A hollow, bitter sound. "It wasn't? Then tell me, Laura, what was it? A mistake? A slip-up? A one-time thing?" She looked down. "I saw you," I continued, my voice quieter now. "I followed you. I watched you walk into this hotel with my best friend. I watched you kiss him. I watched you touch him like you used to touch me. So tell me, how many times? How long?" She choked back a sob. "Mark, please. How long?" I repeated, my patience razor-thin. Her shoulders trembled. "Almost a year." A slow exhale left my lips. A year. I should have felt something. Anger, devastation, hatred. But all I felt was emptiness. I nodded, as if I had already known. Maybe, deep down, I had. I opened the glove compartment and pulled out a small envelope. Laura's eyes flicked to it, confusion crossing her tear-streaked face. "What is that?" I tossed it onto her lap. "Divorce papers," I said simply. Her breath caught. I had already signed them. All that was left was for her to do the same. Her hands shook as she picked up the envelope, opening it like she hoped the contents would change before her eyes. I reached for the door handle. "Mark, wait," she whispered, her voice desperate. I turned back to her, my gaze unwavering. "You made your choice, Laura," I said. "Now live with it." And with that, I stepped out of the car, leaving her to sit in the wreckage of everything she had destroyed. I walked away from the car without looking back. Behind me, I could hear the muffled sounds of Laura's sobs, but they didn't stop me. Not this time. Not after everything. I had spent the past year being a fool, being lied to, being used. But tonight, I had taken my power back. The night air was sharp, cold against my skin, but I welcomed it. It felt like a cleanse, stripping away the last remnants of the man I used to be. The man who had loved her blindly, who had trusted her completely. That man was gone. I climbed into the cab I had arranged earlier, because I had planned for everything. I wasn't going to be the one driving home. I wasn't going home at all. As the car pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Laura was still sitting in the car, motionless, staring down at the divorce papers in her lap like they were a foreign language she couldn't understand. Good. Let it sink in. Let her feel what it's like to lose something without warning. I turned away from the mirror and looked ahead. Forward. That's the only direction that mattered now. I didn't go back to our house. I had already arranged a hotel, a different hotel, for the night. I walked into the dimly lit room, dropped my bag on the chair, and sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing my temples. It was over. Really over. I should have felt relief, a sense of closure. But all I felt was exhaustion. I had spent so much time preparing for this moment, but now that it had arrived, I realized something. I had no idea what came next. My entire identity had been wrapped up in Laura for a decade. My life had revolved around her, my choices shaped by her presence. Now, that life was gone. And for the first time in 10 years, I was completely alone. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and stared at it. Missed calls. Messages. Laura. Mark, please talk to me. Laura. I don't want this to be how it ends. Laura. Just come home. Please. We can fix this. I scoffed, tossing the phone onto the bed. There was nothing left to fix. She had spent an entire year breaking us apart piece by piece, and now she wanted to glue the pieces back together just because she got caught? No. I refused to be someone's second choice. I refused to be a man who settled for a woman who had already given herself to someone else. She had made her decision, and now she would live with it. I let out a slow breath and leaned back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, I'd deal with the logistics. Moving out, legal proceedings, telling family and friends. But tonight, I was going to let go, one breath at a time. Sleep didn't come easily. I lay in the unfamiliar hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant hum of the city. My body was exhausted, but my mind wouldn't stop. It kept replaying everything. Every lie, every moment I had been blind, every second she had been his instead of mine. At some point, I must have drifted off, because when I opened my eyes, the room was bathed in the dull blue glow of early morning. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Laura. Again. The last time I had checked, there were 11 missed calls. Now, 15. Her desperation was growing. I picked up the phone, not to answer, but to look at the last message she had sent. Laura, please, just meet me one last time. I need to talk to you. Face to face. Please, Mark. A deep, slow breath left my chest. Part of me wanted to ignore it. I owed her nothing. But another part of me, the part that needed to see the end through, wanted to go. Not for her. Not for some closure she thought she deserved. For me. Because after today, I never wanted to see her again. We met at a quiet cafe on the other side of town. I chose the place because it had no connection to us. No memories. No ghosts of our past clinging to the walls. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting at a corner table, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. She looked different. Her makeup was subtle, but it couldn't hide the dark circles beneath her eyes. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, strands falling loose like she hadn't cared enough to fix them. She looked lost. Good. I sat down across from her, silent. She lifted her eyes to mine, and for a brief second, I saw something there. Something raw, something that almost looked like regret. But I wasn't stupid enough to believe regret could erase what she had done. I didn't think you'd come, she murmured. I leaned back in my chair. I almost didn't. A shaky breath left her lips. Mark, she stopped, swallowing hard. I don't even know where to start. I tilted my head, studying her. Try the truth. She flinched, guilt flashing across her face. Then, finally, she spoke. I never meant for this to happen, she whispered. I never wanted to hurt you. I let out a humorless laugh, shaking my head. But you did. She nodded, eyes glistening. I know. And I know I don't deserve anything from you, but I just need you to understand. It wasn't about you. I clenched my jaw. Don't sit here and try to make this sound like some inevitable accident. You made a choice. over and over again. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I was lonely, Mark. My hands curled into fists beneath the table. Lonely. I repeated, my voice dangerously low. And screwing my best friend was the solution? She winced. She exhaled sharply. I know it sounds selfish. Maybe it was selfish. But somewhere along the way, we stopped seeing each other. You were always working, always caught up in something else. And she looked down, shaking her head. I let myself drift. And Daniel, he was just there. I stared at her, waiting for something, anything, that would make this make sense. But all I heard was excuses. So what? I asked, voice tight. You want me to understand why you destroyed our marriage? She reached across the table, her fingers grazing mine. I don't want to lose you, Mark. I looked at her hand, at the same fingers that had traced my skin for years, the same hands that had held mine on our wedding day, the same hands that had held him. Slowly, deliberately, I pulled my hand away. You already lost me. A sob tore through her lips. Mark, I loved you, I said, my voice quiet. I would have done anything for you, Laura. Her face crumpled. I know, but you made a choice. And now, you have to live with it. She was full-on crying now, her shoulders trembling. And for the first time since this all began, I felt nothing. No anger. No heartbreak. Just a numbness that settled deep in my bones. I stood up, sliding my wedding ring off my finger. She stared at it as I placed it on the table in front of her. This is the last time we ever speak, I said. She reached for me, her lips parting, but I was already gone. I didn't look back. Not this time. Not ever again. I walked out of that cafe feeling lighter than I had in months. Maybe even years. Laura was behind me now. The lies. The betrayal. The wreckage she had left in her wake. I had given her the chance to say her piece, and it hadn't changed a damn thing. But there was still one person left. Daniel. My best friend. The man who had stood beside me at my wedding, making jokes about how lucky I was. The man who had been in my home, laughing with me, drinking my beer, while he was secretly sleeping with my wife. I had let Laura have her moment. Daniel wouldn't get the same grace. I knew exactly where to find him. Daniel had never been the kind of guy to hide in shame, because men like him never felt shame. He was cocky, untouchable. He had spent his whole life getting away with things because he knew how to charm his way out of trouble. But he wasn't talking his way out of this. When I pulled into the parking lot of his gym, his black BMW was parked right up front. I stepped inside, ignoring the pounding music and the smell of sweat and metal. And then I saw him, standing by the weight racks, chatting with a few guys, laughing like he didn't have a care in the world, like he hadn't ruined my life. A slow, simmering rage burned through my veins as I walked toward him. He didn't notice me at first, not until I was right in front of him. Then he turned, his eyes meeting mine. For a second, I saw something flash across his face. Guilt? Panic? But he covered it quickly, straightening up, forcing a smirk. Mark, he said, wiping his hands on a towel. Didn't expect to see you here. I didn't respond, because there was nothing to say. I just swung. The punch landed solid, right across his jaw. A satisfying crack filled the air as he stumbled back, crashing into the weight rack behind him. The gym went silent. Daniel groaned, gripping his face, eyes wide with shock. What the hell? I grabbed his shirt and slammed him against the metal, my face inches from his. You slept with my wife, I said, my voice deadly calm. People were watching now, but I didn't care. Daniel's hands shot up. Mark, listen. I slammed him again, harder this time. No, you listen. His breathing was ragged, his cocky demeanor cracking. I trusted you, I said. I let you into my home, into my life. And you? I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. You took everything and pissed on it. He swallowed hard. It wasn't. Don't you dare tell me it wasn't like that. I let go of him, stepping back, my fist still clenched. He rubbed his jaw, wincing. Mark, man. He hesitated, then exhaled. I fucked up. I scoffed. That's what you call this? Fucking up? He ran a hand through his hair, his confidence faltering. It just happened. Bullshit. He looked away. I didn't plan it, okay? One night, Laura was upset, and we were drinking, and one thing led to another. I laughed coldly. So what, Daniel? That one night turned into a year of sneaking around? He had no answer. Because there was no answer. Nothing that could make this right. I should beat the shit out of you, I said, my voice low. Daniel tensed. But I won't. His eyes flicked up to mine, surprised. I leaned in, lowering my voice. Because you're not worth it. His expression twisted with something unreadable. I turned to leave, but before I walked away, I spoke one last time. I hope she was worth losing everything. Then I walked out, and I didn't look back. I drove with no destination in mind, the adrenaline from punching Daniel still coursing through my veins. My knuckles ached, but I welcomed the pain. It was nothing compared to what I had endured the past few weeks. I had done it. I had faced Laura. I had faced Daniel. And now, for the first time since this nightmare began, it was over. So why did I still feel like I was standing in the wreckage of my own life? By the time I pulled up to our house, no, her house, it was late. The porch light was on, casting a warm glow over the place we had built together. I should have felt something. Nostalgia. Grief. Anything. But I didn't. I walked inside, ignoring the lingering scent of her perfume. The house was quiet, heavy with the weight of a marriage that no longer existed. Laura wasn't home. She was probably with him. And that was fine, because I wasn't staying. I had made that decision the moment I handed her the divorce papers. I walked into the bedroom, our bedroom, and grabbed the suitcase I had packed days ago. Clothes, essentials, just enough to last me until I figured out where I was going next. I wasn't just leaving the house. I was leaving this life. I made my way to the dresser, pausing when I saw something small and familiar sitting on top of it. My wedding ring. The one I had left on the cafe table. Laura must have brought it home. I picked it up, turning it between my fingers. This tiny, circular piece of metal had once meant everything to me. It had symbolized love, loyalty, and the promise of forever. Now, it was just a reminder of everything that had been broken. I clenched my fist around it, exhaling slowly. Then, without another thought, I walked out to the backyard and threw it. The ring disappeared into the darkness, swallowed by the night. Gone. Like us. I was halfway down the stairs when the front door creaked open. Laura. She stepped inside, her eyes red, her face pale. She looked at the suitcase in my hand, then back at me. A flicker of panic crossed her face. You're leaving. I didn't respond. I just grabbed my keys from the table. She rushed forward, grabbing my arm. Mark, wait. I pulled away, my voice steady. There's nothing left to say. Tears welled in her eyes. But nothing, Laura. I turned to face her fully, my jaw tightening. You made your choice. You chose him. I didn't choose. Yes, you did. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Every time you lied to me. Every time you snuck around. Every time you let him touch you. She broke then, her sobs raw and painful. I was stupid, she whispered. I was selfish. I wasn't thinking. I studied her, but all I saw was a stranger wearing my wife's face. Yeah, I said quietly. You were. Her bottom lip trembled. Can't we fix this? I let out a breath. No, Laura. We can't. A silence stretched between us, heavy and final. She knew it now. This was really the end. I took one last look at the woman I had spent 10 years loving. Then I walked out the door. And this time, I didn't look back. The night air was crisp as I stepped outside, the weight of the past 10 years pressing down on me one last time. But as I reached my car, something shifted. For the first time since I saw that text message, the one that shattered everything, I felt light. I had carried the weight of Laura's betrayal for too long. I had let it seep into my bones, let it dictate my every move, my every thought. But now, I was free. I slid into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel with steady hands. My heart wasn't racing anymore. My chest wasn't tight with anger or grief, just calm. I started the engine, the soft rumble filling the silence. Behind me, the house stood still, dark except for the glow of the porch light. It was no longer my home, just a place I had once lived, a place I had once loved, a place I was finally leaving behind. I didn't have a destination. I didn't need one. For the first time in years, I had nowhere to be, no one to answer to. No lies waiting for me at the end of the night. I drove with the windows down, letting the wind rush through the car, letting it carry away everything I no longer needed. Laura, Daniel, the life I thought I was supposed to have. I was done mourning what could have been, because ahead of me, out there, somewhere, was what would be. Something new, something real, something mine. I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. Then I pressed my foot to the gas and left the past behind. For good. The end. If you like this story, please like and subscribe to the channel.